I stood there, frozen like a deer in headlights, watching the HOA president literally dismantling my air conditioner right in front of my house, yelling into her phone about how this is common property of the community. When I ran outside to stop her, she immediately dialed 911, sobbing to the police that I was stealing her air conditioner. But this Karen had no idea that messing with me was about to become the biggest mistake of her entire life. There were things about my past that she would never in a million years see coming, and boy was she about to find out the hard way. My name is Jake, 32 years old, and I'd been living in this quiet neighborhood for exactly 3 months after leaving my previous job. I came here looking for a fresh start and steady income to get my life back on track, renting a small house in a community managed by a homeowners association. Then there was Linda Morrison, the self-appointed HOA president, 43 years old, who seemed to live in her signature uniform. A tight red T-shirt with HOA printed boldly across the chest and fitted white shorts that hugged her curves. Her most distinctive feature was her wild blonde hair that always looked like she'd been struck by lightning, frizzy and chaotic no matter what time of day you encountered her. She called herself the guardian of community order, but really she was just a control freak who got off on bullying people and wielding her imaginary power over everyone around her. The truth is, Linda and I had been at each other's throats for 2 solid months before the air conditioner incident. It all started innocently enough when I installed a simple window unit to keep cool during the brutal summer heat. Even though I'd gotten proper permission from what I thought was the legitimate HOA, Linda decided it violated her precious aesthetic standards. She began fining me $50 every single week for what she dramatically called climate control violations. Linda would show up at my door with this thick notebook full of hundreds of rules I'd never heard of. She'd flip through the pages like a prosecutor presenting evidence, making up new violations as she went along. Her favorite trick was pointing to some obscure subsection and declaring I was in breach of community standards. According to Section 12.7 of the Community Guidelines, she'd say with that smug expression, all cooling units must be approved by the Architectural Review Committee. When I asked who was on this committee, she'd smile and say, "That would be me." It was like dealing with a dictator who made up laws on the spot. Then came the escalation to false accusations about me being too loud at night and leaving trash around my property. Warning letters arrived like clockwork every few days, each one more threatening than the last. The envelopes were always marked urgent and final notice in red ink, as if I owed thousands in back taxes instead of facing made-up HOA violations. The neighbors started avoiding me after Linda spread rumors that I was a problematic tenant who didn't respect community values. I'd wave to Mrs. Chen next door, and she'd quickly look away and hurry inside. The mailman started giving me suspicious looks. It was like living in a small town where everyone had decided I was the village pariah based on Linda's gossip campaign. During the monthly HOA meeting, she publicly humiliated me in front of the entire community. Linda rattled off a list of supposed violations that seemed to multiply every time she opened her mouth. Unauthorized lawn decorations, improper garbage can placement, excessive noise during quiet hours, she announced to the room. The other residents just sat there in uncomfortable silence, afraid to challenge her authority or become her next target. I tried to defend myself, standing up and saying, "Linda, I've never violated any of these rules. You're making this stuff up." But she cut me off with a dramatic wave of her hand. The evidence speaks for itself, Mr. Morrison. Perhaps you should consider whether this community is really the right fit for your lifestyle. The threat was barely veiled. Comply or get out. But Saturday morning at 8:30 a.m. changed everything forever. I was getting ready for my part-time weekend job when I heard strange noises coming from outside my house. Metal clanging, footsteps on a ladder, and Linda's unmistakable voice raised in conversation. Looking out the window, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Linda was actually climbing a ladder to remove my air conditioner. She was shouting into her phone about how this is community property and he installed it illegally. My heart started pounding as I realized she was literally stealing my property in broad daylight. The audacity of this woman knew no bounds, and I knew I had to act fast before she succeeded in her theft. I rushed outside in my pajamas and bare feet, not even taking time to put on shoes. "What the hell are you doing with my air conditioner?" I shouted, my voice cracking with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Linda spun around on the ladder, her face red with exertion and anger, but still maintaining that arrogant attitude of hers. The screwdriver in her hand glinted in the morning sunlight as she continued dismantling my property. "You've violated HOA regulations too many times, Jake." She snapped back, using my first name like we were old friends. "I have every right to confiscate this equipment under emergency provisions of the community charter." She waved a crumpled piece of paper at me, as if that somehow justified stealing my air conditioner. Her wild blonde hair was even more disheveled than usual from her climbing efforts. When I demanded to see the legal paperwork that gave her the authority to steal my belongings, Linda's expression changed completely. She climbed down from the ladder slowly, her movements deliberate and calculating. She immediately pulled out her phone and dialed 911, switching into full victim mode as she sobbed into the phone with Academy Award-worthy performance. "There's someone here trying to steal my air conditioner, and he's threatening me!" She wailed dramatically, making her voice shake with fake fear. "Please send officers immediately. I'm the HOA president, and this man is being violent and aggressive." I stood there in complete disbelief, watching this woman lie through her teeth to emergency services. She was actually accusing me of stealing my own property while she stood there with my air conditioner half dismantled. The sheer boldness of her deception was absolutely mind-blowing. She maintained eye contact with me while lying to the dispatcher, as if daring me to contradict her. "He's much bigger than me." She continued into the phone. "And I'm afraid he might hurt me if I don't give him what he wants." The performance was so convincing that I almost started doubting my own memory of what had just happened. By 9:15, 2 police officers arrived on the scene, their expressions serious as they approached us. One was older with grey hair and a weathered face, while the other was younger and kept his hand near his radio. Linda put on an Oscar-worthy performance, telling them with tears streaming down her face and her voice trembling with emotion. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she began, clutching her red HOA shirt dramatically. "I'm Linda Morrison, the elected president of this community's homeowners association, and this is community property that he installed without permission." "Ah!" She pointed an accusing finger at me while producing a stack of papers that supposedly proved her ownership of my air conditioner. The documents looked official enough to fool a casual observer. The officers looked between us, clearly trying to assess the situation and determine who was telling the truth. When they asked for my side of the story, I calmly showed them my receipt for purchasing the unit at Home Depot and the installation permit I'd obtained from what I thought was the proper authorities. But Linda immediately accused me of forging the documents, her voice getting higher and more hysterical. He's a fraud. He's been lying to everyone since the day he moved in." Her voice was getting higher and more shrill with each accusation. "Those documents are fake. He probably printed them at home on his computer." She gestured wildly at my paperwork, her blonde hair flying around her face. "This man has been nothing but trouble since he arrived in our peaceful community." The officers started looking at me with suspicion because Linda seemed so confident and had what appeared to be official documentation. They asked me to prove my identity and my right to live at this address, treating me like I was the criminal in this situation. One officer kept his hand on his belt while the other took notes, and I could feel the weight of their suspicion. While I was searching through my wallet for the rental agreement, my hands shaking slightly from the stress of the situation, I accidentally dropped my old IRS investigator badge onto the ground. The metal badge hit the concrete with a distinctive clink, and Linda's eyes went wide when she saw the official federal seal. For just a split second, her confident mask slipped, and I saw genuine fear flash across her face before she quickly composed herself again. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she processed what she'd just seen. The fear in her eyes was unmistakable, even though she tried to hide it behind her usual arrogance. Something about that badge had clearly rattled her, more than anything else that had happened so far. She took a step backward, and her face went pale beneath her makeup. By 10 o'clock, Linda was getting louder and more dramatic, drawing neighbors out of their houses to watch the spectacle unfold on what should have been a quiet Saturday morning. She pointed at me and declared to anyone who would listen with theatrical gestures worthy of a soap opera actress, "I warned this community about this man from day one. He's been nothing but trouble since he arrived." Her voice carried across the entire neighborhood. Some of the neighbors started nodding along, believing her performance without question or independent thought. The crowd was growing larger, and I could feel the weight of their suspicious stares boring into me. Linda was playing to her audience like a seasoned performer, feeding off their attention and using their presence to intimidate me. She knew exactly how to work a crowd, and she was doing it masterfully. "Look at him," she continued, pointing at my pajamas and bare feet. "He doesn't even have the decency to get dressed before threatening a woman. This is the kind of person we're dealing with." The neighbors murmured among themselves, and I could see doubt creeping into their expressions. Linda's character assassination was working perfectly, and I felt increasingly isolated and helpless. That's when Mr. Thompson, an elderly neighbor who'd been quietly watching from his porch, stepped forward with a confused expression on his weathered face. He was probably in his 70s, with kind eyes and the slow, deliberate movements of someone who'd learned to think before speaking. "Linda, I saw you buying that exact air conditioner at Home Depot just last week," he said slowly, his voice carrying the authority of his years. "I was there picking up some garden supplies, and you were loading it into your car." He continued, his memory clearly sharp despite his age. How could it possibly belong to Jake? The crowd turned to look at Linda, waiting for her explanation. Her confident demeanor faltered for just a moment as she processed this unexpected challenge to her narrative. The color drained from Linda's face, but she quickly recovered and snapped back defensively. "You're mistaken, old man. Your memory isn't what it used to be." But I could see the panic creeping into her eyes as her story started to unravel in front of everyone. She was losing control of the narrative, and desperation was beginning to show through her facade. "I would never purchase community property with my own money," she continued, her voice getting more frantic. That's not how HOA management works. Mr. Thompson is clearly confused about what he saw. But her protests sounded hollow, and several neighbors were starting to look skeptical of her explanations. Just when things seemed hopeless, and I thought Linda might actually get away with her lies, another neighbor named Sarah emerged from her house. She was a woman in her 30s, with determined eyes and the no-nonsense attitude of someone who'd had enough of Linda's behavior. She was holding up her phone with a determined expression that immediately caught everyone's attention. "I recorded the whole thing," she announced to everyone, her voice cutting through Linda's protests like a knife. The crowd immediately quieted down, sensing that something important was about to be revealed. Sarah's timing was perfect, and I could see Linda's face go from red to white in the span of seconds. Linda just admitted over the phone that she was going to take that air conditioner to sell it. Sarah continued, playing the video for everyone to hear. The recording was crystal clear, and Linda's voice filled the morning air as she detailed her plan. She was only claiming it belonged to the community as a cover story. The video clearly showed Linda's conversation, where she revealed her real plan to profit from stealing my property. The crowd gasped audibly as they heard Linda's own words condemning her. There was no way to deny or explain away her recorded confession, and the evidence was damning beyond any reasonable doubt. Several neighbors pulled out their own phones to record what was happening, sensing that they were witnessing something significant. Faced with undeniable evidence of her deception, Linda completely lost her composure and started screaming at the top of her lungs. "You're all conspiring against me. I'm the HOA president. I have the authority to do whatever it takes to protect this community." Her voice was becoming increasingly unhinged as her carefully constructed lies crumbled around her like a house of cards. She began pacing back and forth like a caged animal, her wild blonde hair flying around her face as she gestured frantically. "This is a witch hunt! You're all jealous of my leadership and my dedication to this community." The neighbors started backing away from her as her behavior became more erratic and threatening. Then she let slip something that revealed way more than she intended about her true motivations and knowledge. "He's not just some regular guy. He used to work for the IRS. He came here to investigate me." The admission hung in the air like a bombshell, and suddenly everything made perfect sense. Her months of harassment, her desperate attempts to drive me away, her paranoid behavior. It all clicked into place. The police officers immediately realized that Linda had made a false emergency call and was attempting to steal private property. They began investigating her instead of me, and I could see Linda's world starting to collapse as the truth finally came to light. The older officer started reading her rights while the younger one called for backup. After that disaster of a morning, I knew I had to take decisive action before Linda could do any more damage to me or other innocent residents. The gloves were officially off, and I was ready to use every skill I'd learned during my years as a federal investigator. I started researching HOA laws extensively, diving deep into the legal framework that governed our community. What I discovered shocked me to my core. Linda had violated numerous regulations in her so-called leadership role, breaking laws left and right with complete impunity. I began secretly gathering evidence like I was building a federal case, recording our conversations, photographing her destructive behavior, and documenting every false claim she made. During my investigation, I uncovered something much more sinister than simple power-tripping behavior. Linda had been systematically embezzling money from the HOA fund to pay off her personal debts and credit cards. She was also quietly buying up houses in the neighborhood at below-market prices after forcing their owners to move away through targeted harassment campaigns. I found documentation proving that Linda had forged signatures on multiple HOA decisions over the past 2 years. The evidence showed she had stolen nearly $30,000 from the community fund through a complex scheme of fake invoices and phantom contractors. This wasn't just bullying. This was organized criminal activity on a massive scale. I was getting ready to expose everything when Linda somehow got wind of my investigation. She struck first with a preemptive attack, accusing me of illegally breaking into the HOA office and threatening to sue me for trespassing. She was demanding that the police investigate me for burglary while painting herself as the victim once again. It became clear that someone was feeding her information about my activities, keeping her one step ahead of my investigation. Every move I made seemed to get back to her within hours, and she was always prepared with a counterattack or deflection. Fortunately, I wasn't completely alone in this fight against Linda's corruption. Mr. Thompson revealed that he used to work as a certified public accountant and offered to help me analyze the HOA's financial records. His expertise proved invaluable in untangling Linda's web of financial deception and identifying exactly how she'd been stealing from the community. Sarah, whose husband was a local police officer, secretly provided support and guidance because she'd also been bullied by Linda in the past. She knew firsthand how Linda operated and had been waiting for someone with the skills to take her down. Her inside knowledge of how the local police handled these types of cases was incredibly helpful. However, I soon discovered that Mark, a neighbor I thought was helping me gather information, was actually working as Linda's spy. He was reporting every move I made back to her, allowing her to stay ahead of my investigation and prepare her defenses. The betrayal stung, but it also explained how Linda always seemed to know what I was planning. Working carefully with Mr. Thompson's accounting expertise, I discovered that Linda had created a fake company called Community Services LLC to funnel HOA money into her personal accounts. The paper trail was extensive once you knew what to look for, showing systematic theft over multiple years. Sarah helped me access legal records that proved Linda had no legitimate authority to make the unilateral decisions she'd been making. The breakthrough came when I decided to install a hidden camera system around my property. I caught Linda breaking into my house to confiscate the air conditioner, but more importantly, I recorded her admitting to Mark that she'd been embezzling money. In the recording, she explicitly stated her plan to clean house of any residents who wouldn't comply with her demands. The evidence was overwhelming, and I finally had everything I needed to bring Linda's criminal empire crashing down. But I knew I had to be strategic about how I revealed the information to ensure maximum impact and prevent her from destroying evidence or fleeing. I organized what I called an emergency community meeting under the pretense of discussing the future of our HOA and addressing recent concerns. Linda showed up looking confident and self-assured, probably thinking she was going to continue controlling the narrative and maintaining her iron grip on power. She wore her usual red HOA shirt and had her wild blonde hair styled in what she probably thought was an authoritative look. When I started asking pointed questions about the HOA's finances and decision-making processes, Linda became visibly angry and defensive. "You have no right to question me. I am the HOA president," she shouted, her voice echoing through the community center. She threatened to call the police again if I continued what she called disrupting the meeting and undermining legitimate authority. But I was just getting started with my systematic destruction of her lies and corruption. I had prepared my evidence carefully, planning to reveal it layer by layer to maximize the impact and prevent her from creating new lies to explain away each revelation. First, I presented evidence that Linda wasn't the legitimate HOA president at all, showing documents that proved she'd never been properly elected to the position. According to the community bylaws, she had simply declared herself president after the previous leader moved away, without any democratic process or community approval. Linda immediately denied this and claimed she had official paperwork to prove her authority, but she couldn't produce any legitimate documentation. Next, I played the video footage of Linda dumping trash in front of my house in the middle of the night to frame me for violations. The high-definition recording clearly showed her face as she scattered garbage around my property and then took photos to use as evidence of my supposed rule violations. Her face turned bright red as the community watched her deception in action, but she insisted it was all a misunderstanding and claimed the video was somehow doctored. Then Mr. Thompson stepped forward with his detailed financial analysis, presenting a comprehensive breakdown of exactly how Linda had been stealing money from the community fund. His professional accounting background lent credibility to the presentation as he showed bank records, forged invoices, and suspicious transactions totaling nearly $30,000. Linda was visibly panicking, but still tried to deny everything, claiming that Mr. Thompson was confused and didn't understand modern accounting practices. The final blow came when I played the crystal-clear audio recording of Linda confessing to Mark about her embezzlement scheme. Her own voice filled the room as she detailed her plan to force out residents so she could buy their homes at below-market prices. Mark was sitting right there in the meeting, trembling as he confirmed that Linda had been threatening him to keep quiet about her crimes. But Linda wasn't finished making a complete fool of herself in front of the entire community. In a fit of uncontrolled rage, she lunged forward and smashed my camera while screaming at the top of her lungs, "This is all his fault! He ruined my entire plan!" Without realizing it, she'd just admitted that I was her final target on a carefully planned list of residents she wanted to drive away so she could systematically take over their properties. What Linda didn't know was that Sarah had been secretly streaming the entire meeting live to social media platforms. Hundreds of people in the community and beyond were watching Linda's complete meltdown in real time, sharing the video and commenting on her outrageous behavior. The viral nature of her breakdown meant that her reputation was being destroyed far beyond just our little neighborhood. The crowd of neighbors who had once been afraid of Linda suddenly found their voices, demanding that she resign immediately and pay back every single dollar she'd stolen from them. Someone had already called the police, who arrived within minutes to arrest Linda on charges of embezzlement, document forgery, and making false emergency calls. The sight of her being led away in handcuffs was both satisfying and surreal. But Linda had one final surprise that nobody in the room saw coming, a revelation that would explain everything that had happened between us. As the handcuffs were being put on, Linda looked directly at me with pure hatred in her eyes and screamed her confession. "I've been watching you for months! You're Jake Morrison, former IRS criminal investigator. I knew that if I let you stay here, you'd eventually discover everything I was doing." It turned out that Linda had recognized my background from the very beginning and had deliberately targeted me in a desperate attempt to drive me away before I could uncover her massive fraud operation. Her harassment campaign wasn't random bullying or a personality conflict. It was a calculated strategy to eliminate the one person in the neighborhood who had the professional skills and investigative experience to expose her crimes. She had been living in fear of discovery for months, and my arrival had represented an existential threat to her criminal enterprise. The irony was absolutely perfect. Linda's attempts to drive me away had led directly to her own arrest and prosecution. If she had just left me alone and let me live quietly in the neighborhood, I probably never would have looked too closely at the HOA's operations, and she might have continued her embezzlement scheme for years without detection. Linda was arrested and formally charged with multiple felonies, including embezzlement, document forgery, filing false police reports, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The court proceedings moved swiftly once the evidence was presented, and she was forced to pay back the entire $30,000 she'd stolen, plus additional fines and legal fees that left her completely financially ruined. The judge also issued a permanent restraining order preventing her from participating in any HOA activities anywhere in the state. Mark received a lesser sentence for his role as Linda's accomplice and informant, but he was also banned from holding any community leadership positions and had to perform 200 hours of community service. His cooperation with the prosecution helped ensure that Linda received the maximum penalty for her crimes. The neighborhood underwent a complete transformation after Linda's removal from power. We held legitimate, democratic elections for a new HOA board with proper nominations, campaigning, and secret ballot voting. Mr. Thompson was elected as our new president, bringing his accounting expertise and genuine desire to serve the community rather than exploit it. All of Linda's ridiculous and oppressive regulations were immediately thrown out and replaced with a simple, fair system of rules that actually served the community's interests. We established transparent financial reporting, regular audits, and accountability measures to prevent anyone from abusing their authority the way Linda had for so many years. The community invited me to join the new board as a legal advisor, and I accepted the position with genuine enthusiasm. My experience investigating financial crimes proved invaluable in helping establish proper oversight and accountability measures. I also helped several neighbors who had been victims of Linda's previous harassment campaigns, assisting them with legal action to recover damages and clear their names from false accusations. I finally revealed to the entire community that I was a former IRS criminal investigator who had left government service to find a quieter, more peaceful life in suburbia. The neighbors were amazed by the irony that Linda's enemy had been hiding in plain sight, and they appreciated that my professional background had ultimately saved their community from ongoing exploitation. Everyone laughed about how Linda's paranoia and criminal behavior had led directly to her own downfall. If she had simply been a normal, reasonable HOA president, I would have been happy to live quietly and mind my own business. Instead, her harassment campaign had awakened my investigative instincts and set in motion the chain of events that brought her criminal empire crashing down. As I sit here now in my small garden, listening to the gentle hum of my air conditioner, the same one that started this whole incredible journey, I can see children playing safely in the neighborhood. Their parents chat friendly with one another instead of living in fear of arbitrary fines and harassment. There's a small sign next to my front door that reads, "Jake Morrison, HOA Legal Advisor," and neighbors wave and smile when they walk by instead of crossing the street to avoid me. The air conditioner that once symbolized Linda's abuse of power has become a reminder that sometimes standing up for what's right requires more than just being polite and hoping bullies will leave you alone. Sometimes you have to be willing to fight back with intelligence, persistence, and the courage to expose the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it makes people or how powerful your opponents think they are. This whole experience taught me that justice isn't always swift, but it's absolutely worth fighting for, especially when innocent people are being hurt by those who abuse their authority. That little air conditioner is still running strong, keeping me cool during the hot summer days, and every time I hear it humming, I'm reminded that doing the right thing, even when it's difficult and dangerous, is always worth it in the end. The neighborhood has become the peaceful, friendly community I was originally looking for when I moved here. Property values have actually increased since Linda's removal because people want to live in a place where they're treated fairly and with respect. And sometimes, late at night when everything is quiet, I can hear that air conditioner running and I smile, knowing that sometimes the smallest things can lead to the biggest changes in our lives.